First off, before we fully launch in, it is very meaningful to me that you all are here. I really have enjoyed the last 2 years and have felt completely moved by those of you who have taken the time to take my classes, to chat with me, to share your lives with me, and I hope that that does not stop here. It is titled The Last Lecture, however, I will remind you, I am not dying, okay? I did have a student stop by my office after I sent out that email about the last lecture, and they said, I knew you were disabled, but are you dying? Felt a little inappropriate, but, that's totally okay. That is totally okay. It is titled The Last Lecture because I am taking the time to commemorate and think through what the last 2 years have meant and what the last few years have meant in terms of leading me to this particular moment. And it is with that in mind that I want to transport you back to a park called Smith Park, and it's at Middletown, Ohio, which is where I grew up. And that park was there to house a reunion and a union between me and my grandmother. Many of you know that my grandmother, on my mother's side, is from the Philippines. She was raised in the Philippines, and she spoke broken English. Upon my birth, my parents underwent a significant series of financial difficulties that forced her to cross continents away and oceans away to come here. And like so many children of immigrants, I understand the role of sacrifice. And the sacrifice that you all are making to be here, I really appreciate. I was only 2 or 3 at the time, but I remember distinctly being in this park. It was a sunny day with clear blue skies, and monarch butterflies began to land upon me and my grandmother, and it was a moment of silent peace that brought me there. I was so grateful to be there, even as young as I was. And butterflies in that moment began to signify something else to me. They began to signify freedom, to signify sacrifice, and to signify a life that was yet to be lived. That all brings me here to talk about the last lecture. Why is it titled The Last Lecture? As Lacey said, I am leaving higher education. I am leaving the classroom. And so it is very likely this is the last lecture that I will ever give. And if that's the case, what would I say? And what would I try to give to you all, the people I've been lucky enough to call my students, and many of you as you transition into something more profound, more deep, and more lasting, my friends. And I really want that. So in the spirit of that, we're going to do it exactly like my class. We're going to pause for a moment. Everybody look to your left. Everybody look to your right. Everybody look behind you. Awesome. I'm going to give you the next minute, and you are going to introduce yourself to someone that you do not know. I'll call you all back. This time is yours. Thank you for the sign, man. I love you more, brother. I really do. I appreciate that. So introduce yourselves to somebody you do not know. We are going to walk out of here making UT a better place. All righty. Back to me. What is interesting about my time through higher ed is that my being here is the culmination of a dream. And I mean that quite sincerely. I want to share something with you. Back on May 25th, 2010, was right around when I was graduating high school. Don't make me feel old. And an article was written about me with the lovely title of Facing His Challenges, Greg Inspires Others. Do you feel inspired? That's a trick question. There's a whole thing about inspiration porn with disability studies, so I'm just trying to make it through this world like everybody else. But in that article, they say something very interesting in the quote to the left. Seick plans to attend Eastern Michigan University to study English and become a university professor. My being here is not an accident. It is the culmination of over a decade of hope and almost 13 years to the exact day I say goodbye to that dream. That is the premise of this entire talk. What does life look like after our dreams? And to that end, I want to owe you, and I do owe you, a massive thank you. It is not lost on me how many classes that you could skip. Although as I look out at the audience, some of you did skip those classes, so I leave it to you to whether you take that seriously or not. But those of you who did attend class, I genuinely appreciate it. It was so fun and so cool to be able to lecture and to share classroom time with you to hopefully give you something that you might walk away with that is meaningful. My story is a little bit different than most, and I outwardly recognize that. And as I feel myself transported back to that park with my grandmother, I am aware of the enormous sacrifices that my family made to get me here. I've shared this with a lot of you in class, that my birth signaled catastrophic destruction to my family. They, like so many immigrant families, had begun building a magical life. They had a house. They were thinking about getting a dog. They had 2 sons already, my 2 older brothers. And then I was born. And while I am very happy to be here, I also recognize the effect that my birth had on my family, and that it caused enormous financial destruction. They lost their house. They went hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt. And they had to rethink what the life that they were building was going to look like in the entire process. So my thank you and my level of gratitude does not only extend to you all, it extends miles beyond the walls of this room, up to Ohio, continents away, to the Philippines, to Jordan, to Australia, where my family lives all across the world. I had a pretty lovely childhood, all things considered. Oh, I was cute as hell. Oh yeah, I know I was. And I peaked here. It was downhill after this. And if you don't think that, please just keep that to yourself. Keep that to yourself. And what I began to learn during my childhood was that because of my time in the hospital, and I've shared this with you all, I spent an enormous amount of time alone as a child with stale hospital bed sheets, sterile fluorescent lights, and nurses who look through you instead of at you, doctors who prod at you, who treat your body more like a lesson in physiology than as a human being who ought to be treated with something bordering respect. And that was when I was a child. And because of this, I think I began to act out as a child. And when I began to write this speech, I was really worried that I would engage in something called hagiography. Does anyone know what hagiography is? Show of hands. Maybe I can teach you one more thing then. Hagiography is a type of biography that overly flatters its subject. So it's a biography, but it's like, this person is absolutely dope, which maybe or may not be true, but I also want to own my own errors and own my own shortcomings as a human being. And especially as a child, I remember distinctly, we went down to Tennessee for a family vacation. I was maybe 10 at the time. And I am extremely competitive. It belies this cute Asian face. But we were playing mini golf, and I was playing with like a 3-hole lead. I was basically the 5-foot Tiger Woods of the time. And I was doing my best when my brother began to overtake me. What I was unable to articulate at the time was that this was maybe the first opportunity I had to win. Not to be alone, not to be in a hospital room, not to be the subject of study and inquiry, but instead to actually beat my brothers at something. I ended up losing. And all probably 4'6" of me at the time took that golf club and began to bash it into one of those little houses that they have on many golf courses repeatedly until my parents owed the golf course a pretty substantial sum of money. I was deeply embarrassed by this, completely embarrassed, and I don't recommend that. But as I look back on the opportunity and look back on the experience, this idea of how we ask for love and affection came through. That people who need the most love often ask for it in the most unloving ways. And I see this in the classroom all the time. The students who are the most checked out, the students who maybe turn things in late, the students who maybe speak when I'm trying to speak, usually it's not them trying to annoy me, upset me, or even insult me. It's just them trying to get attention. I would ask you to consider the same thing when you are going throughout the course of your life. Maybe somebody's not trying to be rude or selfish or ignorant or hateful. Maybe they need you to love them. And I know Jay will appreciate that message, so shout out Jay. As we move forward, we have this idea of comparison in our own lives and the comparisons that we make. And Giancarlo, will you hand me that photo? Yes, sir. Thank you so much. All right, everybody take a moment to look at this. Oh, no oohs and ahs for this shit? What is that? Come on now. All right, let me put this photo right here for you all to look at it. I want to fast forward to me in first grade. I was not a good artist, but our first grade class, led by the venerable Mrs. Calvin, who has since died, R.I.P. That wasn't really a relevant detail. It was kind of awkward, but yeah, wow. Mrs. Calvin was a phenomenal teacher, she really was, and she comes into class and she announces, hey, we've got this art contest coming up. It's for the entire state of Ohio. Anyone who wants to enter should enter. I, thinking of myself as a young, handsome Van Gogh, went home and drew this drawing. And as you can see, this is my older brother. He does actually have pupils in real life, I promise. This is my middle brother, Joseph. So this is Chris, this is Joseph, and this is me, apparently with an extremely long arm. And I submitted this off. Mrs. Calvin was hyping me up. She's like, Pat, this is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. I was like, damn right, it's phenomenal, I did it. Anyway, I submit it off, I send it off, and it wins the contest. That, I don't know if I was the only one to submit, but it really felt that way because I'm gonna be honest, this is terrible. This is terrible, and I know that. But it ends up winning, and we all go to Ohio. Now, when Mrs. Calvin told me that I won, I felt ecstatic, like I was on top of the world, like I had this newfound skill, drawing, that I never knew that I had, and that I was going to live this great life as a modern, as a modern artist with that. And for the record, my brother was kind enough to go into my mother's house and mail this to me in preparation for this talk. So this is the actual drawing that I drew all that time back then. And there were two experiences that I walked away. So we get invited to Columbus, Ohio. For those of you who have been lucky enough to avoid the hellscape that is Ohio, we went to Columbus, which is the capital. We all met, and all of the artists, so there were 12 of us, 1st through 12th grade, we all got seated at this table. And with us, we had to bring our drawings. And in that moment, all of the pride, all of the joy, all of the elation that I experienced from this drawing evaporated in a moment because I realized how terrible I am at drawing. And to a certain extent, that's probably true, and probably why I became a professor. But now that I look back on the experience, I feel quite bad for first grade Pat, because I allowed the comparison to my fellow artists to detract from the pride in my work. It was looking over my shoulders at everybody else's work that took away from my own. There's a lesson to be had there. The other lesson that I learned from this, beyond the idea of comparison, is what I eventually ended up learning about this drawing. And the drawing was spread around my family, and it was shared. And I realized that the more people that paid attention to what I was doing changed how I felt about my work. And you all feel this acutely. Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. I'm just checking to see if somebody's not raising their hand so I can call them a liar. Cool. We all have smartphones. We are all constantly being recorded. We are all constantly engaging in this search for an audience. After we leave here, I want to invite you to do something for yourself, to draw something, no matter how terrible, and don't let anybody see it. Not everything that we do deserves an audience. And so much in this age, and especially with my students now, you all, sometimes I get the impression that you're looking for someone who doesn't exist. And if you can make something for yourself, a creation that is an expression of what you think and what you feel and what you have experienced, well, that'll make Mrs. Calvin proud. That is my thorough suggestion. Let's keep moving. I have had the opportunity to do many jobs, and as a result, I've had the opportunity to experience multiple things. So before this job, I was the director of forensics at Eastern Michigan University. Raise your hand if I talked about this in class. Cool. For those of you who I did not, forensics is more or less speech and debate. We coach people on how to be good public speakers, people your age, college students. And I found myself at one point really caught up in the drab part of life of the different things that I had to do, that I had to submit budget reports, that I had to grade, that I had to travel with this group of 18-year-olds that somehow managed to be later than me for everything. And I felt myself dragged down by life. I want to pause here and ask you to close your eyes for a moment. Now I want you to think about your day today. And what are the things that you have regarded with trivial frustration? Maybe it was traffic today. Maybe it was an annoying interaction with a friend or a coworker. Maybe your food didn't turn out quite like you like. Go ahead and open your eyes. There's a really great piece of advice that was once given to me, and it is that we should not confuse what we get to do with what we have to do. Do not confuse what we get to do with what we have to do. And so often we approach life in that way, that we are required to do various subjects when nobody's asking you to. And if I pause, step back for a moment, the budget, dang, how cool that somebody handed me the keys to a $250,000 scholarship budget. The travel, how awesome that I can drive a car, terribly, but how cool is that? How cool is it that I get to coach young people to use their voice to say something that might actually matter to them, even if I disagree with it? So, think for a moment, give you a moment of silence. I want you to think about something that you felt bad about today or annoyed by today, and with someone next to you, share that, and how does that fit within a larger scheme of gratitude? And share that with somebody. It can be a stranger, you can do groups of 3, but don't be a lioness like a lot of you in class and make a group of 5. I'm not asking for that. Not asking for that. Okay? Take a moment, go ahead, share with each other. What is that thing you were annoyed by? All right, thumbs up if we are good. Thumbs up if we are good. Now, for a moment, I am very curious. How did that act of gratitude share or change the way you look at your day? I am genuinely asking. Does anybody have an answer? How does asking this question of what we get to do versus what we have to do, who can give me a response? What is the difference?
I get the microphone. I was just gonna say, like, I mean, it shows like what we get. Like, yeah, the small things can like annoy us, but it's like we still have so much good for us, so it kind of gives you more of a positive look on everything.
100%. Absolutely. Somebody else. Do two more responses.
I guess I would say it gives you a greater appreciation for things. Like, I guess an example would be like, I was getting frustrated that I couldn't write today, but then realizing that I can write, or like that I am a writer, it makes me appreciate that I have this talent, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Let's do one more. Let's do one more.
I would say that if we didn't have some of the things we do every day, what would our life look like? And would we really want that change and just to be appreciative of the things we have now?
100%. 100%. I'm going to share a quick story with you. When I was 16 years old, it is one of the moments that genuinely transformed my life. Like most 16-year-olds, I was dealing with a number of issues, acne, foremost among them, pizza face, got very used to that nickname. Different nicknames that were thrown my way, but when I was 16, I went to bed one night. It was a pretty nondescript day. I remember it actually pretty acutely. And it was halfway through the night, and I wake up, and I feel something really wet on the left side of my face. And I sort of wake up as one does. Last time I checked, I did not fall asleep in a puddle of water. So what was this? For a moment, I paused. I was like, did I jump in the ocean in my dream? I did not. I woke up and plot twist, it was blood. It was blood. I know, how's that for an M. Night Shyamalan twist? I woke up and there was this pool of blood that was under my head. And when your body is as fragile and unreliable as mine, you begin to become numb and anesthetized to these kinds of experiences. Woke up, looked at it, knew it had to be dealt with, put my pillow to the side, went back to sleep. I know, how badass is that? I wake up the next morning. My father would go to work at like 5 in the morning, so it was super, super early. But I happened to wake up because, you know, when you're hearing impaired, you're very sensitive to the light. So I wake up, I walk out, and I tell my dad, hey, you know, I woke up, there was this pool of blood. He very calmly responds, and he looks at me in this moment of shocking awe in the way that parents have to control their emotions for the sake of their children. And he says, yeah, we'll get it checked out later today. What I did not know at the time, veiled by youthful ignorance, is that he called off work, my mom called off work, they kept Joe and Chris, my brothers, at home, and we got into a car, and at 8 a.m., we were at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. They immediately do x-rays, they do a MRI on my head, and what they found was something called a cholesteatoma, or a tumor that had wrapped itself around my middle ear. Naturally, I was like, is that cool, or? It was not. It was killing me, apparently. This cholesteatoma was growing very quickly, and they told me within a matter of weeks that it would press on my brainstem and potentially paralyze and kill me. Whoa. Okay. So we had to respond really differently to that. So Within 48 hours, I was in an operating room again, staring up at a hospital ceiling again, under fluorescent lights again, and laughing gas was being poured in, and that familiar smell wafted me off to something that's supposed to feel like sleep. And I woke up, and I attempted to stand up, as bold as I was, and immediately hit the floor. Why? Because all of your balance comes from your middle ears, and my world had literally been turned upside down overnight. And they asked me how I felt, and I told them I feel just fine. I put my hearing aid in, was trying to push it past the blood. It's kind of gross. And they said, "Can you hear out of that ear?" And I said, "Yes." And I never forget this because the doctor nodded at me in this sort of knowing way, hoping, like I was hoping, that I was defying the laws of biology, like I had transcended to something more and experienced maybe a miracle. I really believe at my core that doctors are always hoping for this, that doctors are hoping to be wrong. This time, they were not. The entire hearing of my left ear was wiped away. I was completely and suddenly deaf entirely in my left ear. And it changed the way I looked at life. I've always been hearing impaired, but going deaf quieted the world in a way that I was not ready for. And people try to whisper things to me, even today in my left ear, and I have to do this weird nodding thing, like, People have to stand over on my right side. That's why if you've ever walked alongside me, I do this weird, like, dance thing. For the record, those of you who try to block me, I don't appreciate it. Get out of my way. I need to heal. And this is what I have noticed, is that sometimes folks don't know. I was 16, and I would start sharing these stories with my friends, one of which is here tonight. Guy I met in middle school, and I remember sharing a story with him. I don't even know if he remembers this. We were sitting together, and he was complaining about his high school girlfriend at the time. And I wanted desperately in that moment to really try and experience a problem that 16-year-olds should have to deal with heartbreak, with an essay that was overdue, with test scores that weren't quite as high, not losing your damn hearing, and not dealing with something that can be taken from you in a moment's notice. I wallowed in that for years, in so much heartbreak over what I felt was deeply unfair. Until I eventually realized that being half deaf has certain privileges. Headphones are 50% off. It's pretty cool. I can also always just turn to somebody I do not like. That works out pretty well. And something more important, being half deaf means you try twice as hard to hear the people who are trying to talk to you. I wish you all would do the same. Try twice as hard to hear the people who are trying to talk to you. It's a lesson that I have to literally remember, but it's one that I hope you can carry the spirit of Pat. How weird is that to say? And hopefully emerge listening to each other and emerging more compassionate as a result. Listen to this. I was thinking about this when I was driving down. You mind me asking you a question?
No, no. You have your own life to live. Just live it the best you can.
Oh, I know. Hey, look at me. You vacationed a lot of places. What is your favorite?
I like Tennessee.
You've been to the whole damn world, and your favorite place is Tennessee.
Yeah, it is.
Why's that?
Really, it's the prices is right, and areas. Uh, Very good. Plus, I'd like to visit more places that's not scenic within the country and where you can see the country.
What you just heard was a conversation in the last week of life between my father and I. My father died almost 4 years ago, and I remember being so swept and caught up by the tides of life that I was working really hard, was trying to run this forensics team, I was trying to be successful. My father had fallen sick at the time. I remember a conversation with my boss, and she looked at me and she said, "Pat, life can wait. Life can wait. Go be with your dad." And so I did. Drove a couple hundred miles south from Michigan to Cincinnati, where my dad was being kept. A few weeks later, he moved to hospice. As all of you know, hospice is that great white flag that is somewhere between surrender and victory in the next life. Haven't quite figured it out. And over the course of that week, we were able to have these wonderful conversations. And I want to be very clear. My father was my hero. He was the person who was better than me. He taught me the value of an education. He dropped out at 9th grade. He had the reading level of a second grader. And yet every day he would sit with me as a child and would help me do my homework, even though I was never asking him for help. He just did that because I needed it. It is a hard thing for a boy to lose his father, and it is a harder thing to lose the only person that you regard as a friend. And I spent that time with him, and we got to chat. And for someone who does not believe in an afterlife, I keep hoping that maybe his heaven will look a little bit like Tennessee. That he might be able to look out at the country and look down and be proud of the son that he at one point sat with and helped. The greatest hope that I have is that after this talk, you can leave this hall, call your parents, and say thank you. Because they are the people who make it possible for you to be here. Every day I try to approximate the image of my father, to try and be a man who put pride second and put service first, who put country before everything else, and put his allegiance to his family as the primary thing with which he guided his life. I want you to take a moment tonight in that calm refuge that we all escape to when we are alone and ask yourself, am I being like my hero? Because I hope and I pray that I am being like my father. Thank you all for sharing that experience with me. When I experienced death for the first time, it asked me to think about endings. It asked me to think about what it means to move into the next period of life. And what it taught me was we don't have to move to the afterlife to live lifetimes here on earth. And that's why I'm so grateful for all of you and so appreciative, because the last 2 years have been an extraordinary life for me. I have enjoyed walking down to Armature Works, getting slightly drunk and reading. I have enjoyed making not so subtle jokes at the students who don't come to my classes regularly as I would like. I have enjoyed when I get texts from you at 1, 2, 3 in the morning from Mick Denton's. I really do appreciate that. And sometimes I'm awake. I'm like, what is this? But I appreciate it, I do, and I hope I still get them. This lifetime, these 2 years have been extraordinary. So it's with that in mind that I want to share this I have tried to figure out, with my great escapes from death over the course of my life, and tried to figure out what is meaningful to me. And what sticks out to me is the story of my parents. My mother is an immigrant from the Philippines. I don't know why I keep looking at you, but you're an immigrant, so I think I vibe with that. I vibe with that, Sumer. But, yeah, but I do feel like I'm tokenizing you, so my bad, my bad. There is context to this photo that I wanted to share with you. My parents met in 1985, and they met in Saudi Arabia at the foot of the Red Sea. They give different stories, but more or less, I like the idea that they met by the Red Sea, the same place where Moses parted and made way to liberation and freedom, because it meant that they fell in love next to something holy. Their love was holy. And their love gave birth to me, which gave birth to this moment, which gave birth to this interaction with you all. The night before this photo was taken, I was the only one with my father in hospice, and he was, I believe, about to die. And he wakes up in this delirious moment, eyes crazed, and looks at me, and he says, "Is your mom here?" I said, "No." He just fell back to sleep. Keep in mind, he was hooked up to a monitor, his heart had flatlined, and he had suddenly come back to life. Goes to sleep. The next day, he holds my hand, looks me intently in the eyes, and says, "I'm going to pass tonight. Please make sure your mother is here." So we did. My mother comes to hospice. She crawls into bed with my father. And something holy happened, because he never woke up from this picture. And what a way to pass. What a way to end. What a way to transform into something in the arms and in the bed with the person you love most. Our love doesn't have to be romantic. It can be platonic. It can be to service. It can be to animals. But to feel so at peace in that way, I hope I one day feel that. If I look at it this way, endings are a beautiful thing. Endings can be so much more. And I ask you to think about this quote. Endings from our perspective are always based on just that, what we think. If we can zoom out for a moment, leave ourselves for a moment, we can remember that we were once a young boy with a grandmother in a park letting butterflies land on us. And if we do that, we can all be something more to each other. This is not an ending. It is not even a goodbye. The University of Tampa has been a lifetime unto itself, and you all have made it worthwhile. Thank you.